Hello and welcome to this presentation for the SEIA Utility Scale Power division on the seismic shifts in NERC compliance for renewables and specifically solar. So my name is Peter Stovall and I'm the product lead for Raptor Comply here at Raptor Maps. Raptor Comply is an OT security and compliance platform that is specifically tailored to the NERC reliability standards, and I'll talk a bit more about that towards the end of the presentation. For those of you who don't know Raptor Maps, we've worked with leading solar IPPs, utilities and O&Ms over the past decade with the goal of improving long-term asset value through automation. I know we have a range of backgrounds and skill sets in the audience, so we'll start with a quick 101 and refresher on the NERC ecosystem. So up top you have FERC. FERC is the government agency that regulates the interstate transmission of electricity and a few other things. And NERC is a non-profit regulatory authority. NERC ensures reliability and security of the grid in North America. As part of that, NERC develops mandatory reliability standards and conducts compliance audits through 6 regional entities. Also does a bunch of other great stuff, including training and awareness. The reliability standards can be split into 2 families, and they're really a set of rules and requirements that govern how owners and operators of grid assets must plan, operate, and protect those assets to ensure bulk power system reliability and security. So as I said, those standards are split into 2 families. You have the operations and planning, or O&P standards, and those govern physical grid operations, including balancing, emergency operations, and so on. And then you have the critical infrastructure protection, or CIP, and those are the cyber and physical security requirements, and we'll be focusing a little bit more on those today. The standards govern registered owners and operators, and then they're tiered by impact category. So the first question is then, who needs to register? Now, up until May 2025, you had to register a facility if you fell within this category 1 here on the screen, and so that's interconnected at 100 kV or more, where either the individual nameplate rating was 20 MVA or megavolt amperes or more, so for example an individual inverter within a facility, or the overall plant or facility had an aggregate nameplate rating that was 75 MVA or more. You might be wondering what MVA is or means and why NERC used it. MVA stands for megavolt amperes, and it is a measure for apparent power, whereas megawatts measures real power. So MVA is a little bit more conservative and will always be slightly more than the megawatts, but it does roughly equate to megawatts. So for the purposes of this presentation, feel free to just think megawatts when I say MVA. So as of May last year, NERC introduced an additional category known as Category 2 inverter-based resources, or IBRs, and this applies only to solar, storage, wind, so those inverter-based resources. And this category kicks in at 60 kV, so that's at a distribution interconnection voltage, and then 20 MVA, so much smaller than that 75 MVA threshold for the facility. So that's registration, and then I mentioned that the standards apply based on a tiering system. So for NERC CIP, they apply based on whether you are low impact, medium impact, or high impact, and you can see that on the slide here. So low impact is between 75 MVA and 1500 megawatts at that 100 kV interconnection, and then medium impact is anything over the 1500 megawatts in aggregate, and then high impact, I won't get into, there's some nuance there, but they share that space a little bit. Now if you think back 20 years ago when the standards were developed, there's great reason why NERC focused on large generator assets at medium impact or above. They were, at the time, by far the biggest risk to reliability. And as a result, the CIP standards have been very light touch for the low impact category compared to medium impact and high impact. And now we have the change with Category 2 IBRs, which we'll talk about shortly. Now, in terms of solar and storage, all solar facilities operating in North America today are under 1500 megawatts. So they all fall within either the low impact category, the Category 2 IBRs, or neither, and non-applicable non-NERC category there. And again, unlike 20 years ago, we now have 80% of the bulk electric system in either that low impact or category 2 category. What you do see for solar in the medium impact category is control centers. So when control centers are managing and operating facilities that amount to more than 1,500 megawatts in aggregate for a single interconnection, so one of those 4 interconnections, then that control center is considered medium impact, and those higher order regulations do kick in. So what has changed and what is changing? On January 12th, NERC published the CIP Roadmap, and it's really hard to overplay the consequence of this development from a cybersecurity policy perspective. This is really NERC recognizing that the grid has changed faster than the CIP framework could accommodate. So that shift from 20 years ago, where most things were medium impact, to now where most things are low impact or below. And as a result, we have a tectonic correction, and really hats off to NERC for putting together and publishing this roadmap. It recognizes 3 shifts. First, low impact does not mean low risk. Coordinated attacks on multiple category 2 or low impact assets can produce system level effects, but they sit outside the traditional compliance perimeter. Second, there are many new attack paths that have become foundational to grid operations, either through remote access, third-party operations, or similar. And then third, the critical grid control traffic in many instances flows beyond the utility's control on public networks. So I think Patrick Miller at unpacks put it really well. He said the roadmap is NERC's acknowledgement that modern grid risk is now created by aggregation, connectivity, and dependencies that often sit outside traditional CIP boundaries. So how does NERC plan to act on these acknowledgements? There are 3 dominant control themes that emerged in the CIP roadmap. One is a multi-factor authentication everywhere. It's currently only required for high or medium impact systems, but CIP 3.11 will extend MFA for all interactive remote access to low impact facilities. The standards effort there has already been initiated and is likely to bite in 2029 or so, to be determined. And then the second is foundational cyber hygiene. So many other requirements reserved for medium impact facilities today are now considered by NERC to be foundational hygiene. And if we're honest, many of the industry have felt that really NERC CIP low impact requirements were just the floor and have gone beyond those requirements in practice to apply more of the medium impact standards. However, we can expect to see that actually embodied within the regulations. So things like asset identification, configuration management, vulnerability and patch management, and so on, we're going to see those pulled down to low impact in coming baseline standards over the next few years. And then finally here, public network communications protection. So NERC is directing a standards effort to protect not just control center to control center links, but also facility to control center communications that rely on public or carrier dependent networks. So this is really more than just an incremental regulation. It's a philosophical shift in how NERC approaches grid security. Whereas previously the focus was on protecting the perimeter, i.e. the stronger the fortress, the more secure the asset, now the focus is on monitoring everything that is connected within that perimeter, catching threats east to west as well as north to south. And this feels like a direct response to recent cyber attacks, including Volt Typhoon, where attackers have been able to go undetected and live off the land, so to speak, within the perimeter for a very long time. The other philosophical shift here is from an impact-based approach to a maturity-based approach. So for the past 15, 20 years, CIP has operated on impact-based scoping, where you protect critical assets and then have minimal requirements for lower impact systems. That era has definitely ended. NERC is shifting to maturity-based risk assessment of attack vectors across the entire ecosystem and a focus on systemic vulnerability. That necessarily shifts from looking at the size of a registered asset to the vulnerability of an attack system within the ecosystem. So one other thing that was really interesting in the roadmap is the clarity that we hope to see on cloud and virtualization. So for years, there's been regulatory ambiguity around cloud adoption that has effectively constrained adoption. Utilities want the resilience, the scalability, the security capabilities that cloud platforms provide, but SIP was written for on-premise control environments, and the roadmap seeks to remove that ambiguity, and well, more so, the coming standards will remove that ambiguity. So we can expect cloud governance standards in the next few years, and also modification of the SIP standards for virtualization and cloud, currently with FERC for approval. A few other changes here. So we'll talk about category 2 inverter-based resources, but we can also expect to see expansion of scope to other elements of the ecosystem in this new philosophical approach, including EV charging infrastructure, large loads, aka data centers, and third-party access, as well as ER aggregators. So let's unpack the expansion of standards to those smaller solar, wind, and storage sites. And this is really NERC closing the reliability gap. And given that much of grid-connected renewable resources has operated outside of NERC jurisdiction for several years, despite having material grid impact. So I mentioned earlier, the registration criteria here are anything that's over 20 MVA, so roughly 20 megawatts. But interestingly, interconnected at a distribution voltage of just 60 kV rather than the 100 kV of low impact. In terms of the initial compliance burden, folks had to register these facilities by May 15th of last year. And by May 15th of this year, those facilities have to actually be compliant with the standards that apply out of the gate without any rewording needed. So there are 8 of those. I have them on the next slide, and those apply as of May 15th. From then onwards, we fully expect to see a rolling rewording of the remaining reliability standards to factor in this new category. And so we'll see a rolling expansion of the reliability standards to these smaller solar, wind, storage assets in the coming 12 to 36 months and beyond. So this is a build once, expand many scenario, and we'll talk about the business implications in just a moment. So if you've already registered, you should be thinking about building a compliance program. If you're not registered, perhaps your next facility may require registration, and we'll talk about how important it is to act early in terms of getting the house in order for this sustained expansion. So here are the 8 standards that will apply out of the gate to category 2 IBRs. So solar facilities, solar and storage facilities, 20 to 75 MVA. And there's a mix of data and modeling, operations and control, and protection. And then in the coming 1 to 3 years, we'll see NERC CIP standards likely revised to apply as well. Good webinar coming up from NERC on March 26th that will go through these in more detail as well. So what it means for the business, NERC has been super clear in stating their end goal here. Smaller sites are part of the ecosystem. They represent a threat vector and a point of entry to the grid. They also represent a risk of instability if attacked in aggregate. And so smaller sites are getting much more regulation in the years to come and starting already this May. From a regulatory risk perspective, the majority of the grid, so 80% of grid assets, are low impact category 2 IBRs or non-NERC. So we're really talking the whole solar industry here, and it has already begun. So those first 8 standards kick in May 15th, and then we can expect a sustained ramp up over the next 3 years, particularly in light of the philosophical shift towards bringing more of the foundational hygiene that we see in medium impact today brought down to lower impact. So it's not just a question of category 2 IBRs getting low impact regulation, it's more likely that we'll see category 2 IBRs get some of what's currently medium impact, which is a much higher threshold. In terms of budget impact, some folks and some companies have slightly longer procurement cycles, and that can mean that 2028 deadlines can require 2026 planning. So already now looking at solutions and what it will take to get those spun up within your organization. Also really important to emphasize here that these are sustained incremental expansions. There's a reason NERC called it the CIP Roadmap. It's not one and done. It's a sustained initiative. And those are hard to resource, especially if you treat them as isolated events. You have to really budget and plan for the long run here. And that means having a plan that scales. So most importantly, have a solution in place. It has to be able to scale with your fleet, and it has to be able to scale with the sustained standards expansion. So I'll talk a little bit about Raptor Comply. Raptor Comply is an OT security and compliance platform tailored to NERC reliability standards, and it's really designed to help owners and operators scale their compliance programs. It's tailored to NERC reliability standards, and we have very deep solar and storage expertise. It currently supports the full medium impact requirements, and those are the ones that we expect to see NERC bring down to the low impact and perhaps even category 2 IBR level. You can see some of those features listed on the right there. One thing to note about Raptor Comply as well is you can use it with any service provider. So whether you're an owner wanting to bring in your operator or your service provider or vice versa. And the overarching goals that we have for customers are to decouple costs from fleet expansion. So you're not doubling compliance costs when you're moving from 10 sites to 20 or from low impact to medium impact, and mitigate risk. So by having your steady state be audit ready fleet wide, there's an impact on cost and efficiency because you're not spiking in activity with every regulatory interaction. And we also estimate that the quality of that response really reduces orders of follow up. And then finally, increased in operational efficiency. So as an example, two of the features that we have on Raptor Comply are physical access control and transient cyber access. So if you have field technicians out waiting to get access to a site or a substation, instead of sending emails around to approve their access or to approve them plugging a laptop into a tracker, that's all handled within the platform, and we can save time operationally that way too. So I hope that was helpful and that you learned a little bit about the shift in NERC philosophy and how that is playing out today and will continue to play out over the coming years. If you would like to learn more, then please join our mailing list. You can scan the QR code here, or you can visit our website. And I'm always interested in speaking to and meeting folks within the industry on any of these topics or other topics. So please reach out anytime. You have my email on the screen, or you can scan that QR code. And I would say just spare a thought for your colleagues in compliance and OT engineering. There is a lot coming their way. And if you think they would be interested, then please feel free to share this presentation and my details with them. Thank you for watching.